I have a very lovely story for you today, my friends. A story that I think is going to stay with you long after you finish listening. So settle in, get comfortable, maybe pour yourself a nice cup of tea, because excited, this one is something special. Now, let me tell you about a restaurant. Not just any restaurant. A place called the Gilded Quill in Chicago, where the air itself tasted like money, where the glasses were crystal and the napkins were pressed linen, and where one woman had made everyone's life absolutely miserable for years. Her name was Genevieve Davenport, wife of Richard Davenport, one of the most powerful men in Chicago. You know the type, the kind of wealth that doesn't shout. It just sits there, heavy and unavoidable. And Genevieve, she wore that wealth like armor. Blonde hair swept up perfectly, diamonds at her throat, a midnight blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Every Friday at 8 o'clock on the dot, she would sweep into that restaurant, and you could feel the entire staff flinch. Liam, the bartender, the man who had seen everything in 20 years behind the bar, he pulled aside every new employee and said the same thing. See that corner booth? That's the throne. And the queen arrives at 8 every Friday. One mistake, one perceived slight, and she will not rest until she sees you personally fired and blacklisted from every fine dining establishment west of the Hudson. And he meant it. Just the month before, a young busboy named Kevin, a college kid just trying to save up for tuition, accidentally brushed the edge of Genevieve's cashmere wrap with his tray. Didn't drop it, didn't stain it, just touched it. She called it being soiled by his commonness. She made such a scene, right there in the middle of service, that the manager fired Kevin on the spot, and she watched him cry as he took off his apron. According to everyone who witnessed it, she seemed to enjoy it. That is the woman we are dealing with. Now into this world walked Chloe Mitchell, 30-something, quiet, observant. 3 months ago, she'd been a junior research assistant for one of Chicago's most tenacious investigative journalists. Then the newspaper downsized, and her dream, along with her paycheck, simply evaporated. So there she was, adjusting the stiff collar of a uniform that cost more than her last 3 pairs of shoes combined, learning that water glasses must be filled to precisely 1 inch below the rim, never more, never less. Chloe was not your average waitress. She had spent years learning how to find the cracks in the armor of untouchable people. She just didn't know yet that she was about to need every single one of those skills. Her first real encounter with Genevieve happened when the regular waiter assigned to table 7 called in sick on a Friday night. The staff had a name for that illness. Liam called it Davenportitis. The manager, Mr. Henderson, looked across his terrified staff and his eyes landed on Chloe. "You're calm under pressure," he said quietly. "You're on table 7 tonight." A wave of sympathetic murmurs rippled through the kitchen. Liam caught her eye from behind the bar and gave a slow, warning shake of his head. Chloe just nodded. "Yes, Mr. Henderson." She spent the next 15 minutes preparing the way a soldier prepares for battle. She memorized the file. Still water, no ice, 1 paper-thin slice of lime, not lemon. Brioche rolls only in the bread basket. Her husband takes Macallan 25, 2 fingers, no mixer. Every detail was a potential landmine. When the Davenports arrived, Chloe was ready. She executed the service flawlessly. The water, the scotch, the bread basket, all perfect. For a moment, she thought she might actually survive the evening. Then Genevieve ordered the lobster bisque. Chloe watched the chef ladle it from the pot herself. She could see the steam rising in a fragrant cloud. She carried that bowl carefully and placed it before Genevieve. And Genevieve stared at it, dipped her spoon, raised it halfway to her lips, and stopped. "Is there a problem with the kitchen tonight?" "Not at all, Mrs. Davenport. Is the bisque not to your liking?" "It's tepid." She announced it like a verdict, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "I expect my soup to be hot. Not lukewarm. Not tepid. Hot. Is that such a difficult concept to grasp? Now, here is where most people would have crumbled. Here is where most people would have apologized profusely, started to shake, started to cry. And Genevieve was counting on exactly that reaction. That fear, that panic, that was her food. That was what she fed on. But Chloe did something Genevieve had never encountered before. She observed. She noticed that Genevieve wasn't looking angry. She was looking expectant. She was waiting for the performance of fear that would confirm her power. And Chloe decided, quietly and firmly, not to give it to her. "I am very sorry to hear that, Mrs. Davenport," Chloe said. her voice a perfect blend of professional concern and unshakable calm. "I will have a fresh, piping hot bowl brought to you immediately. No, don't bother. The moment is ruined." The threats came, the name-taking, the warning that Chloe wouldn't last another night in this establishment. And through all of it, Chloe held Genevieve's gaze. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She gave a small, composed nod and said, "I understand completely, Mrs. Davenport. Thank you for the clarification." And she walked back to the kitchen with measured, even steps. That calm, that refusal to play the game by Genevieve's rules, was its own act of quiet defiance. And as Chloe would later discover, it was the thing that made Genevieve most afraid. As the Davenports were leaving that night, Richard Davenport paused beside Chloe and pressed a folded $100 bill into her hand. "I'm sorry about that," he mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "She's under a lot of stress." Chloe watched them leave. She didn't spend that $100. It felt like evidence, because in that moment, something clicked into place. Genevieve Davenport's entire empire of cruelty was built not on power, but on fear, the fear of other people. And Chloe Mitchell, to her own great surprise, was not afraid. She was curious, and for a woman like Genevieve Davenport, that was far more dangerous than any enemy she had ever faced. So Chloe started to listen. In the break room, during the quiet Tuesday nights when the restaurant was half empty, the staff had years and years of stored-up stories, like an archive of suffering. The waiter she had accused the sommelier of mocking her heritage with a wine choice. The hostess, Amelia, who was forced to scrub off her lipstick in the bathroom because Genevieve called it too provocative. Every story was petty, every story was personal, and every story pointed to the same thing. This woman was obsessed with one specific performance, the performance of old money, old class, old refinement. Any crack in that performance sent her into a rage. That suggested not strength. That suggested terror. Liam, the bartender, became Chloe's most valuable source. One slow Tuesday, as he polished his row of bitters bottles, she asked him the key question. What was she like when she first started coming in? Liam paused. Different, or trying to be the same, but not as good at it. This was maybe 10 years ago, right after she married Richard. She was anxious, always watching other people, what fork they used, how they pronounced sommelier. She was learning a script. He paused again. The real interesting stuff is what nobody talks about. Before Richard, there was no Genevieve. It's like she appeared out of thin air with a vague story about a quiet upbringing in New England. "I've been in this city 20 years. I know all the old families. I'd never heard of any Van Sass." A woman with no past. That night, Chloe went home, opened her worn laptop, and started looking. She searched public records. Nothing. She searched news archives from around the time of the engagement. Polished, identical profiles. The same sparse details repeated over and over, like a story someone had very carefully rehearsed. She searched guest lists of charity galas from the years before Richard met Genevieve. Her name appeared nowhere. Frustrated, Chloe tried something different. She ran a reverse image search on one of Genevieve's older photos. For hours, nothing useful. And then, on the 12th page of results, a strange link appeared. A defunct website for a local talent agency in Bakersfield, California, a relic from the early 2000s, barely functional. On the headshot page, among a sea of hopeful young faces, was a photo that made Chloe stop breathing for a moment. The girl was younger. Her hair was a brassy, over-bleached blonde. She wore too much blue eyeshadow and cheap lip gloss. But the bone structure was undeniable. The sharp jaw, the high cheekbones, the cold, determined set of her eyes. Beneath the photo was a name. Not Genevieve Vance. Jenny Albright, from Bakersfield, California. Chloe felt the adrenaline of the hunt flood through her. She ran a new search, and it all began to pour out. A local beauty pageant win, mentions in Bakersfield Community News, and then the discovery that changed everything. A link to a fan forum for a short-lived reality television show from 2004 called Asphalt Angels. A show that followed young women working as promotional models for a local monster truck rally circuit. Loud, dramatic, reaching desperately for a fame that never came. And one of its main stars, known for her sharp tongue and explosive fights with the other girls, was a fiery blonde named Jenny Albright. Chloe found a video clip someone had uploaded to a forgotten platform. The quality was terrible, but the audio was clear. There she was, a younger, brasher version of the woman who terrorized the Gilded Quill every Friday night, wearing denim shorts and a tank top with a beer logo, screaming at another woman over a parking spot. Her accent was not the clipped, refined tone of a society matron. It was a flat, hard Californian drawl. The dragon didn't just have a crack in her armor. She had a whole other life buried beneath it. And now Chloe knew exactly where to look. Now, I want to pause here for just a moment, because I want you to really feel the weight of what we've just uncovered together. I want you to stay with me, because what comes next is where this story becomes something truly important for all of us. But before I continue, if this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling that fire in your chest that Chloe felt when she refuses to be broken, please take a second and hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Because every week, we tell stories just like this one, stories that matter, stories that will leave you stronger than when you started. Now let's keep going. Chloe found a woman named Sarah Jenkins through an old forum post, someone who had gone to school with Jenny Albright. Over a series of careful emails, and then a long phone call, Sarah painted the full picture. Jenny had grown up in a rundown part of Bakersfield, the daughter of a mechanic and a checkout clerk. She was fiercely ambitious and possessed of a burning, consuming shame about where she came from. She practiced her accent in the mirror. She read fashion magazines like textbooks. Her entire being was organized around one single goal: escape. Escape Bakersfield, escape poverty, escape the version of herself she could not stand to look at. Asphalt Angels was supposed to be her big break. Instead, it branded her as exactly the thing she was most desperate not to be. After the show was canceled, she disappeared from Bakersfield entirely, telling people she was going to Los Angeles. No one heard from her for years. And then, about 10 years ago, Sarah opened a magazine and saw a headline: Millionaire Richard Davenport to wed society belle Genevieve Vance. And there she was. Different hair, different clothes, different name, but the same face. Jenny had done it. She had erased herself and become someone else entirely. But Sarah mentioned one more thing: the show's finale. The producers had staged something they called a monster truck princess pageant. The women had to ride on the back of a pickup truck wearing cheap tiaras and sashes. Jenny had a complete breakdown on camera, not one of her calculated dramatic moments. A real one, screaming, crying, saying how much she hated the town and everyone in it. She threw her tiara at the camera crew. The footage was never aired because she threatened to sue, but it existed somewhere in a production company's archive, and now Chloe knew about it. She had the ghost of that secret sitting right in her pocket. 3 weeks after the earring incident, which I need to tell you about, Genevieve came back. But let me tell you about the earring first, because it is one of the most breathtaking things in this entire story. On the busiest Saturday of the month, with the restaurant packed with Chicago's elite, Genevieve executed what can only be called a masterpiece of cruelty. In front of an audience of the most influential people in the city, she reached up to her earlobe and gasped. Her diamond earring, her anniversary diamond, worth $250,000, gone. And her eyes went straight to Chloe. You, the waitress. You were the last one near me. You were leaning over me when you cleared my husband's plate. The accusation was clean, devastating, and completely deliberate. In that world, the word of Genevieve Davenport against the word of a waitress was not even a contest. It was an execution. The staff searched on hands and knees. Mr. Henderson wrung his hands and sweated through his collar. Genevieve performed grief and outrage for her assembled audience. She demanded Chloe be searched. She called for the police. She used the word theft. And with every passing minute, the accusation hardened into fact in every watching mind. Chloe knew she was being framed. She knew the earring was most likely in Genevieve's own clutch, waiting to be discovered later after the damage had already been done. Fighting with denials was useless. She had to change the story. She took a breath, and she said one word: Bakersfield. She folded it into a sentence about stress and disorientation, so it sounded almost like nothing, almost like a mistake. But it wasn't nothing, and Genevieve knew it. The blood drained from her face. The imperious fury flickered and cracked. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, and the terrified girl from Bakersfield looked out through those cold eyes. Then Chloe turned to Richard Davenport and suggested, very calmly, that he might want to check the lining of his right jacket pocket. Sometimes small, heavy objects fall without us noticing, she said. Reasonable. Measured. Richard put his hand in his pocket. His fingers closed around something small and hard. He pulled out the missing diamond earring. The room went completely silent. Then the whispers started. Not about theft. About Genevieve. A woman who had accused a waitress in front of Chicago's finest, demanded a police investigation, held the entire restaurant hostage, and the earring had been in her husband's pocket the whole time. She didn't look powerful. She looked foolish, hysterical, laughable. And in Genevieve's world, being laughable was worse than anything. She snatched the earring from Richard's palm, grabbed her clutch, and walked out of the gilded quill without a single word, her head held high and every line of her body screaming defeat. Now, 3 weeks later, she was back. Alone this time. No husband. A sharp black pantsuit instead of her usual elegance. She walked directly to her table, found Chloe with her eyes, and crooked one finger. Chloe walked over. Genevieve told her to sit down. When Chloe reminded her she was on duty, Genevieve said, "Sit, or I will buy this restaurant by morning and turn it into a parking garage." Chloe sat, and Genevieve unleashed everything. The legal team, the background check, the student loans, the tiny apartment, the failed journalism career. Every vulnerability she'd found, laid out on the table like weapons. She was going to destroy Chloe. She was going to call every potential employer, call her a thief and a blackmailer, bury her in legal fees until she begged for mercy. Every word was designed to crush. When she finished, Chloe leaned forward slightly. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "I am a researcher, and I am very good at my job." And then she told Genevieve, calmly, everything she knew. Jenny Albright, Bakersfield, Asphalt Angels, the monster truck rallies, the unaired finale, the pageant, the tiara, the meltdown, the production company that still had the tape locked in its archive. At the mention of the pageant, Genevieve's composure did not just crack. It shattered. The blood left her face entirely. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She looked not like a powerful woman. She looked like the terrified girl she had spent 15 years running from. Then Chloe laid out the terms. Leave the restaurant. Never come back. Never speak the name of anyone on this staff again. Leave everyone here alone. If there is so much as a whisper of trouble, Chloe will dedicate herself to finding that tape. And when she finds it, every society columnist, every gossip blog, and every one of Genevieve's fair-weather friends will receive a copy. A long silence. Sighs. Then, slowly, Genevieve Davenport rose from the table. She didn't say a word. She didn't look at anyone. With the last remaining thread of her dignity, she walked out of the gilded quill and never came back. The kitchen staff, who had been watching from the doorway, broke into quiet, spontaneous applause. Mr. Henderson stood beside Chloe, speechless. She let out a long breath, picked up her water pitcher, and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Henderson. Table 4 needs more water." Relieved, the reign of terror was over. And Chloe Mitchell, who had arrived at that restaurant desperate and broke and quietly devastated, left it as the woman who had faced the dragon and watched it run. Not with anger, not with revenge, with the quiet, undeniable, undefeatable power of the truth. Proud, she didn't stay a waitress much longer. Her courage and her intelligence caught the attention of a wealthy patron who had watched that final evening unfold. She was offered a job as a private investigator, returning to the work she truly loved. And the story of what she had done at the Gilded Quill became a legend, whispered among the service industry of Chicago. The story of a quiet woman with a spine of steel who toppled a tyrant one carefully observed meal at a time. Now let's sit with this for a moment together, because this story is not just entertainment. This story is a mirror, and what it reflects is something that many of us have felt in our own lives, in our own bodies, sometimes even without being able to name it. Let's talk about what was really happening at that restaurant. Genevieve Davenport, or Jenny Albright, as we now know she truly was, is what psychologists and mental health professionals would describe as a person suffering from profound shame-based identity disruption. That is a long way of saying that somewhere inside her was a person she was absolutely terrified to be. And when we are that terrified of ourselves, we often turn that fear outward. We become predators of other people's dignity because it keeps us from having to face our own. Every time she made Kevin the busboy cry, she was not feeling powerful. She was feeling safe. Every time she sent back a perfect bowl of soup and watched a young waiter tremble, She was drowning out the voice of Jenny Albright, the girl in the cheap tiara, the girl she never forgave. That is the tragedy inside the cruelty. But here is what I need you to understand, and I say this especially to those of you who have had a Genevieve in your life, maybe a boss, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone in your own family. Understanding the pain behind someone's cruelty does not mean excusing it. It does not mean you are required to absorb it. Understanding is not the same as acceptance. The people around Genevieve absorbed her cruelty for years, and it cost them. Kevin lost his job. Sam shook at his own table. Amelia cried in a bathroom and scrubbed off her lipstick. These were real wounds, given to real people, and they left real marks. Let's talk about those marks, because this matters enormously. When a person in a position of perceived power, whether that power comes from money, status, a job title, or even just a very loud, very confident personality, consistently demeans and humiliates others, the effect on those people is not small. It is not just a bad day at work. Research in psychology consistently shows that chronic exposure to contempt and public humiliation activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. It is not a metaphor when someone says cruelty hurts. It literally registers in the brain the same way. For people in service roles especially, and so many of our daughters, our granddaughters, our younger selves have worked those jobs, there is an added layer of vulnerability. You are often in a position where you cannot fight back. You cannot raise your voice. You cannot even leave in the middle of a shift. You must stand there and absorb it and smile and say, "Of course, Mrs. Davenport." And that forced compliance, that inability to defend yourself, compounds the damage significantly. The psychological term for what Chloe was experiencing when she walked into Table 7 that first time is called anticipatory anxiety. She had been warned so thoroughly about Genevieve that her nervous system was already primed for threat before the woman even walked through the door. This is what bullies, whether they bully in boardrooms or restaurants or living rooms, rely on. They rely on their reputation traveling ahead of them. Fear is their advance team. But here is what Chloe did that was profoundly, beautifully psychologically healthy. She interrupted the cycle. She refused to confirm the fear, not by being reckless or dramatic, by being grounded, by observing, by asking herself, in the middle of that impossible moment, what is actually happening here? What does this person actually need? And what do I actually know to be true? That is an extraordinarily mature and powerful psychological skill. It is called emotional regulation, and it is something that most of us have to practice for years before we can access it in a high-pressure moment. Chloe had developed it through years of investigative journalism, through learning to sit with uncomfortable truths and wait for the real story to emerge. And the real story of Genevieve Davenport was not power. It was fear. Now, I want to talk about something that I think resonates deeply for many of us, particularly those of us who have reached a certain age and had enough life experience to recognize the pattern. We have all met someone like Genevieve. Maybe not quite so dramatic, maybe not with quite so many diamonds. But we have all encountered the person whose cruelty seems disproportionate, whose rage seems to come from nowhere, who seems to need other people's pain in order to function. And for most of our lives, we have been told, in one way or another, to simply manage around them. Avoid them. Don't make eye contact. Don't draw their fire. Keep your head down. Survive. And sometimes that is genuinely the wisest and safest course of action. I want to be clear about that. There are situations where the safest thing is to give a bully the wide berth they demand, and there is absolutely no shame in that. Protecting yourself is not weakness. But I also want to say this. The fear that bullies breed in us is not always accurate information about the world. It is often accurate information about them. Genevieve was terrifying because everyone believed she was powerful, but her actual power was almost entirely borrowed. It was borrowed from Richard's money. It was borrowed from the fear of the people around her. It was borrowed from a fiction she had invented about who she was. The moment someone refused to confirm the fiction, the whole structure began to wobble. This is one of the most important things that psychology has taught us about power and intimidation. It is often a performance, and the audience makes the performance real. Remove the frightened, compliant audience, and the performance becomes what it always was, a woman screaming about soup. Now let's talk about Chloe for a moment, because her journey in this story is as important as Genevieve's unraveling. Chloe arrived at the Gilded Quill in a state of grief. She had lost her career. She had lost her sense of purpose and identity. She was wearing a uniform that didn't fit and doing a job that wasn't hers. And underneath all of that competent professionalism was a woman who was quietly devastated. Many of us know that feeling. That specific loneliness of being overqualified and undervalued. Of using only a fraction of who you are because circumstances have temporarily narrowed your world. Of waking up every morning and thinking, this is not where I was supposed to be. And yet, it was precisely because of where she found herself that Chloe had the opportunity she had. The universe, in its strange and circular way, had placed her exactly where her particular set of skills could do the most good. She had the investigative instincts. She had the patience. She had the emotional regulation. And she had just enough distance from the world of the gilded quill to see it clearly. There is a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It is the well-documented phenomenon where people who have been through genuine loss, genuine suffering, genuine displacement, often emerge from it with capacities they didn't have before. Not in spite of the difficulty, but because of it. Chloe's loss of her journalism job was real. Her pain was real. But it had also, in ways she couldn't have predicted, made her ready for exactly this. I want every woman listening to this who is in a hard season right now, who feels like the life she worked for has been temporarily derailed, to hear this. The skills you have built do not disappear because your circumstances changed. You carry them with you, and they will find their moment. Now, let's talk about the thing Genevieve most feared, because I think it is something many of us fear, at least a little bit, and understanding it can set us free. Genevieve was terrified of being seen, not of being criticized, not of being disliked, of being seen, of people looking at her and recognizing the girl underneath, the girl with the brassy hair and the cheap lip gloss and the burning ambition and the bone-deep shame. That girl was not gone. Ginny Albright was alive and well inside Genevieve Davenport, running the whole operation from behind an elaborately constructed curtain. And when Chloe said the word Bakersfield, what she did was reach through that curtain and tap Jenny on the shoulder. That is why the effect was so immediate and so devastating. Chloe didn't call her a fraud. She didn't make an accusation. She said one word. One specific, private, impossible to explain away word. And in Genevieve's mind, the whole fortress came down. Because the thing about a secret, truly a secret that we have built our entire life around keeping, is that it is exhausting. The maintenance of it is a full-time psychological occupation. Genevieve had been doing that work every single day for 15 years. Every carefully chosen word, every monitored gesture, every corrected vowel, every small cruelty designed to keep people at exactly the right distance so no one could ever look too closely. It is a tremendous amount of energy to spend on being someone you are not. And the moment someone indicates they can see through it, the exhaustion of 15 years crashes down all at once. I have worked with women who have spent decades maintaining a version of themselves that they believed was the only version that would be loved or accepted or taken seriously. And almost universally, when that facade finally cracks, even though it is terrifying, what they describe most is relief. A terrible, disorienting, profound relief. I am not saying Genevieve deserved compassion for what she did. She does not get a pass because she was once a scared girl from Bakersfield. The harm she caused was real, and it was chosen. But I am saying that the cruelest people we encounter are almost always the most frightened. And understanding that, not excusing it, understanding it, changes how afraid we need to be of them. Now I want to spend some time with you on the practical questions, the ones I imagine are running through your mind right now. Because so many of you have told me, in your messages and your comments, that you have people like Genevieve in your lives. Not necessarily with her money or her platform, but with her essential character. The daughter-in-law who makes every family gathering a performance of your inadequacy. The woman in the neighborhood association who makes you feel 2 inches tall at every meeting. The former friend who has a talent for saying the cruelest thing at the most vulnerable moment. The boss whose moods run the entire office. The family member whose approval you have been chasing your whole life and never quite reaching. So let's talk about what to actually do. The first thing, and I cannot say this strongly enough, is to stop trying to earn the approval of someone who has demonstrated they do not offer it in good faith. This sounds simple. It is one of the hardest things a human being can do because we are wired for belonging, wired to want the people around us to think well of us, wired to try harder when we feel we have disappointed someone. Bullies know this. They exploit it expertly. They keep the bar just slightly out of reach so that you keep jumping, keep trying, keep making yourself smaller and more accommodating and more desperate to please. The first act of liberation is to stop jumping. Chloe did not try harder after Genevieve told her the soup was tepid. She did not grovel. She did not catastrophize. She simply noted what was happening, observed it clearly, and responded with the minimum necessary professionalism. She stopped playing the game by Genevieve's rules. And that is when the dynamic began to shift. The second thing is what I would call strategic patience. Chloe did not immediately deploy everything she knew. She waited. She gathered information. She let the situation develop until the right moment. This is not passive. This is actually a very high-level emotional and strategic skill. Reactive people hand their power to whoever provokes them. Chloe never gave Genevieve that satisfaction. Many of us, when we are hurt or threatened, want to respond immediately. We want to make the pain visible, to be validated right now, to have the injustice acknowledged in this moment. And that impulse is completely understandable. But it very often serves the bully more than it serves us. If Chloe had confronted Genevieve with what she knew the moment she found it, she would have given Genevieve time to prepare, to construct a counter-narrative, to mobilize her considerable resources. Instead, she waited until the moment was exactly right. There is a dignity in that patience. There is also a power. The third thing is what I call truth as the ultimate armor. Chloe's final weapon was not gossip or malice or even the prospect of public exposure. It was simply the truth. She knew something true, and the truth was enough. She didn't have to shout it or publish it or wave it around. She just had to let Genevieve know that she knew it. Truth, quietly held by someone who refuses to be intimidated, is more powerful than almost any other force I can name. And this is the principle I want you to carry with you from this story. Not revenge, not retaliation. Truth. Know your own truth. Know the truth of your situation. Know the truth about the people who are trying to diminish you. Because that knowledge, even when you never have to use it out loud, changes the way you hold yourself. It changes your posture. It changes the steadiness of your eyes. And people who are trying to intimidate you can feel that change, even when they can't explain it. Genevieve felt it in Chloe from the very first night. She couldn't name it. She couldn't understand it. But she knew this woman was different. That is why she couldn't let it go. Now let me speak directly to those of you who have experienced something like what happened to Kevin, to Sam, to Amelia. To those of you who have been publicly humiliated, unjustly accused, made to feel worthless by someone with more power than you, and who had no Chloe standing nearby to intervene. First, I want to say, what happened to you was wrong. Fully, completely wrong. The fact that it happened in a workplace or a family or a social circle where you felt you couldn't fight back does not make it less wrong. It makes it more. You were put in a position of forced vulnerability, and someone exploited that. That is not a reflection of your worth or your intelligence or your strength. It is a reflection of theirs. Second, I want to talk about what chronic exposure to that kind of treatment does to us, because understanding it is the first step toward healing it. When we are repeatedly subjected to contempt from someone we cannot easily avoid, our nervous system goes into a permanent state of low-grade alert. We start to anticipate the cruelty before it comes. We start to monitor everything, our words, our posture, our expressions, looking for any signal that a storm is approaching. We start to minimize ourselves, take up less space, speak more quietly, apologize more often, hoping that a smaller target is a safer target. Over time, if this goes on long enough, we can internalize the contempt. We begin to see ourselves through the eyes of the person who has been diminishing us. We start to believe, somewhere deep and quiet and hard to reach, that maybe they are right. Maybe we are not smart enough, not refined enough, not worthy enough. This is not weakness. This is an entirely predictable human response to a sustained campaign of psychological harm. But it is not the truth, and it is healable. The healing begins, almost always, with one thing: naming what happened. Not in your own head where it can be argued with and rationalized away, but out loud or in writing to someone who can witness it. A friend, a therapist, a journal, even a community of people you have never met but who understand. The act of naming abuse as abuse, of saying out loud, what that person did was wrong, and it hurt me, and I did not deserve it, is not self-pity. It is the first brick in the foundation of recovery. The second step is finding your feet again, literally and metaphorically. Chloe found her feet by going back to what she knew, her skills, her instincts, the work she was genuinely good at. When we have been badly shaken, we need to reconnect with our own competence. What do you do well? What do you know that is true? What part of your life still belongs entirely to you, untouched by the person who has tried to diminish you? Start there. Stand there. Let that be the ground under your feet while you rebuild. The third step is what I think of as strategic distance from the Genevieve in your life. This might mean a conversation. It might mean a firm boundary. It might mean quietly removing yourself from situations where she has access to you. It might mean the kind of confrontation Chloe had, the calm, clear laying out of exactly what you know and exactly what you require. The right level of distance is different for every situation.